Hi, this is Dustin with Dustin's Dollars. Today I'm going to be talking about Tellurian, specifically about why I think it could make sense for an upstream gas producer to become the equity partner in, or for multiple gas producers to become the equity partner in Tellurian to help fund Driftwood. This is, going on the theme that Sharif Suki has been talking about recently, and I wanted to explore it just a tad bit further from a cash flow perspective. Before I begin, let me remind you that I am not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I currently hold a long position in Tellurian. So basically, this video should be for your entertainment purposes only, because I could be wrong about everything that I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. So, with that being said, let me get into today's topic, and that is there's this outstanding piece in terms of funding Driftwood, which is kind of a big question mark among a couple others, but one of those is where are they going to get the money specifically from the equity portion, right? I think they've said that, they've implied at least that they have made some good progress with banks and maybe had some of that lined up, but there's a question mark in terms of, well, banks aren't going to finance, or we assume are not going to finance the whole project, and they're going to expect Tellurian to somehow come up with the rest of the money. We've said amounts of 30 to 40%, somewhere in that range. And so they've talked about getting an equity partner to invest in them, to front the cash for that. And recently, Sharif Suki has been talking about this in his videos, and I think it was this week and Tuesday that he talked about this in detail about how, maybe it should be an upstream gas producer, a U.S. gas producer that would become their equity partner, one or more such companies. And I want to talk about today why that could make sense for them. So I made a simple model here where I am looking at what is the impact for that gas producer on their profits given various prices at Henry Hub. And let me go through the assumptions real quick. So the assumption that I have is that it costs them, let's say, $2 per MMBTU all in for their actual gas production. And then I have sort of each of these rows down here that represents, how much Henry Hub would be selling at in, various scenarios. We know today that it's around, I guess I don't know today, but recently it's been around $8. I think some of the long-term forecasts that are that it's going to fall back down into the $4 range. I think during COVID and such, we saw it fall down and around about two. Maybe it only fell to three, but I think it fell even down in the twos, if I recall. And so I have that as assumption number one. Assumption number two, because I know we're talking about LNG, is that the LNG price would be here about $15. And again, this is not really specific. This is just an average price of JKM and TTF, right? Since Tellurian does have contracts that are priced in, both or a combination of both. And then I use the numbers from Sharif Suki's most recent video, where he talked about effectively having a $6 profit margin if JKM is at $15. And so and Henry Hub is at $4. So that leads me to believe that there's roughly $6 additional dollars in there of cost. Did I do that right? Five additional dollars of cost there to get that margin, right? So this gets you $6 margin per MMBTU at $4 Henry Hub price. And then I looked at the hypothetical profit for an upstream gas producer that produces 2 trillion cubic feet of gas per year. And this is a number that I pulled from one. I just looked at one company, gas producer in the U.S. of EQT. That's how much they produce, just to give you a rough ballpark. And I think that's it's useful because this is, on the same order of magnitude at least to what Driftwood will be at full operations. So I wanted to have the numbers that are somewhat balanced. Obviously, if there's a huge imbalance between the amount of gas that company produces versus the amount of LNG that Driftwood will produce, the numbers are skewed one way or the other, depending on, the balance between this. But this was I felt a reasonable size for a company where this calculus would matter. And then what I did is I looked at what the profit is from that gas, and then I looked at the profit from LNG. And right now I have this as a parameter, right? I can change this, but right now I'm looking at 500 BCF, which I believe is what they would have for Driftwood at effectively full operations if this company took a 35% stake in Tellurian, which is what Sharif Suki was implying today, right? Because that's at 35% roughly that they're looking for somebody to purchase in. At least it's 35% of the Driftwood cost. He said it as if it was 35% of Tellurian, but it's hard to see, right? Maybe it would be in Driftwood, and then they would just get this profits. But so I'm just using that sort of as my model here. And so what this looks like, getting into the interesting results here, is pretty simple when you are just looking at, first forget about the LNG, just look at what are the economics for that gas producer, right? I think it's fairly straightforward. And again, this is maybe too much of an oversimplification, but if I assume it costs them $2 per MMBTU to produce the gas, you can look at the various Henry Hub levels, and obviously their margins per MMBTU are just going to scale up linearly with what they can sell the gas for, right? And this is a situation they're in now, is at $8 Henry Hub, they're making bank. They're making a lot of money there. And sorry, I should also state the $2 I sort of just pulled as a rough ballpark number in terms of what their costs are to produce gas. But if I also, sorry, that's not the right chart I want to go to. And then if you look at what is that if they were producing 2 trillion cubic feet of gas, right? You just multiply those margins by that amount and you get what their profits are, right? And this ranges, from that $2 per MMBTU at Henry Hub. They make no profit because they're what they can sell it for is what it costs them to produce it. And then it increases linearly all the way up to at $8. They're making, $12 billion annually of profit. Now, what does it look like if we throw the LNG into the mix? If they take a stake in Tellurian and now they have exposure to that. And so, I'm assuming that they just buy a stake in Tellurian or in Driftwood. Again, there might be a little bit of difference there. But effectively, they're gaining the exposure to selling the LNG at the JKM prices or TTF prices. And what is interesting is that you realize that when they take a stake there, that means that they are adding sort of both top line and adding the revenue and the costs, right? So they are adding on the revenue that they get by being able to sell at JKM for the LNG, but also the cost that it took to produce that LNG. And again, one of the major costs, or can be one of the major costs, depending on what the price is the actual gas that they have to purchase. That Tellurian does, because as of right now, they do not have enough they don't have any enough upstream locked down in order to be able to fully support Driftwood. And so what you see here is these blue bars show the margins for the gas, and that's just carried over from the other chart, right? It goes up as the price of Henry Hub goes up, but the red is the proposed or the expected margins for the LNG, right? And you can notice that this actually goes down as Henry Hub goes up, right? Because the margin on the LNG goes down because they have to purchase from Henry Hub. And so what you see is that when the gas producer would be making less money just from their gas production, the margins are wider on that LNG, so they can make more money from the sale of LNG from having that exposure. And so if you add this up in terms of profit, what does this look like? This is what it looks like, is if I am using that 500 BCF of LNG and those, all the assumptions that I had up above, this is what it looks like. And this is really the bottom line for why it could be pretty intriguing for a gas producer to take a stake in Tellurian, because you can see that when gas prices are low, that there's no blue bar here, right? They are not able to make money selling at Henry Hub and producing gas. However, that is when Henry Hub gas is cheap, because of their exposure to Tellurian and exposure, therefore to LNG sales that are at JKM prices and TTF prices. That spread is much wider because the cost to produce the LNG is way down, because the again, the upstream gas is very cheap. Therefore, they can make a lot of profit from that LNG. And obviously, as the price of the gas goes up, those red bars get smaller and smaller, but that's when they can make more and more money just from producing their gas. So the net effect, and you could even see here, if Henry Hub got even smaller, the profit from the LNG would get even higher here. And this is where it really comes down to, it's a bit of a hedge for them, right? In the sense that when gas prices go up, Henry Hub prices go up, they make more money because they're a gas producer. If Henry Hub prices are down, they have a way to make more money because it reduces the cost of producing the LNG. And again, so they sort of have two ways to win here, if you will. So that is why I think it could make sense. And it's actually it made me chuckle because when he first noted this idea, because it seems the opposite of the selling tactic that they were using a couple of years ago to try to fund Driftwood, and that was trying to have eventually the end clients who are today purchasing the LNG, the electric companies, the utilities, whatever, to be able to buy some of the equity in Tellurian in order to effectively fix their costs. And now that was sort of a fear-based sell, right? You fix your costs so that you're not stuck paying whatever the market cost is for the LNG at JKM prices and TTF prices. And the market was obviously not super interested in that because they didn't get enough takers. I'm sure they're regretting that decision now. And Petronet. But now if we look at look at this from the opposite side, right? Now he's selling greed to the upstream producers, saying, look, you can be exposed to all of this, and it's both greed and it's a hedge, right? It's a hedge on both sides. Either for when they were previously selling to the end clients of the LNG, they were selling a hedge on the costs. Here they're actually kind of selling a hedge on the profits. So anyways, I found it interesting when I really thought this through and realized what this would mean for an upstream gas partner. I thought maybe some of you would find this interesting as well if you hadn't gone through the same mental exercise for yourself. So that was what I wanted to cover today. Let me see if there's anything on the chat. Nope, I do not see anything on the chat. If you are still watching, just FYI, I do these videos usually live around 10, 11 p.m. Eastern US time. Try to do them Sunday through Thursday. Just FYI, if you ever want to, pay attention, hop on when I'm doing these and join the chat. I love to have folks on here and have a little bit of discussion. But that is everything I wanted to cover today. So thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it and have a good one.